The plasma fire had turned the asteroid mining station into a hellscape of twisted metal and acrid smoke. Captain Jake Morrison crouched behind an overturned cargo hauler, his emergency beacon flashing red in the chaos. 3 days into what should have been a routine supply run to the outer rim, he had stumbled into the middle of an interstellar war zone. The Kethvar raiders had struck without warning, their sleek black ships descending on the mining operation like vultures. But they hadn't expected resistance from the Zephyrian Defense Corps specifically. They hadn't expected her. Through the smoke and debris, Jake watched in awe as the lone Zephyrian warrior carved through enemy lines with terrifying efficiency. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her muscular frame encased in bioadaptive armor that shifted from deep crimson to midnight black as she moved. Her skin held a golden luminescence that pulsed brighter with each enemy she dispatched, and her forearms wielded energy weapons with deadly precision that bordered on artistry. But she was outnumbered 50 to 1. Jake had heard stories of Zephyrian warriors, how a single one could hold off an entire battalion, how they were genetically enhanced from birth to be living weapons. Looking at her now, cutting through raiders like a force of nature, he believed every tale. Yet even forces of nature could be overwhelmed. He saw the moment when exhaustion began to take its toll. Her movements became fractionally slower, her golden skin dimming as her energy reserves depleted. The raiders sensed weakness and pressed their advantage, surrounding her in the central bay of the station. Every rational thought screamed at Jake to stay hidden. He was a cargo pilot, not a soldier. His ship's modest defensive systems were no match for the raiders' advanced weaponry. Getting involved would likely mean death for both of them. But as he watched her take a plasma bolt to the shoulder and stumble, something inside him rebelled against the idea of hiding while someone fought alone against impossible odds. Jake's cargo hauler, the Lucky Strike, wasn't built for combat, but it was built tough. He fired up the engines and burst from cover, using the ship's reinforced cargo bay doors as a battering ram. 3 raiders disappeared in a shower of sparks and twisted metal before the others realized what was happening. "This way," he shouted through the ship's external speakers, laying down covering fire with his mining lasers, not military grade, but enough to make the raiders take cover. The Zephyrian warrior turned toward his voice, her large, cat-like eyes widening in apparent surprise. For a moment, she hesitated, as if unused to receiving help. Then another plasma burst barely missed her head, and survival instinct took over. She moved like liquid mercury, flowing between enemy fire to reach his ship. Jake had the cargo bay open and was pulling her inside before the raiders could regroup. Up close, he could see the intricate tattoos that covered her exposed skin, not decorative, but functional biomarkers that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Hold on," Jake yelled, slamming the cargo bay shut and diving for the pilot's seat. The Lucky Strike wasn't fast, but she was sturdy, and he pushed every system to its limit as they broke free of the station's docking clamps. Behind them, the raiders gave chase, their sleek fighters dancing around his lumbering freighter like angry wasps. Jake threw the ship into evasive maneuvers that would have made his old flight instructor proud, using the asteroid field's natural cover to break line of sight with their pursuers. It took 3 hours of cat and mouse through the rocks before they finally lost the last raider. Jake slumped in his pilot's chair, adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. Only then did he remember his passenger. He found her in the cargo hold, sitting with her back against a shipping container. Her armor had shifted to a deep blue color, apparently its default healing mode. The plasma burn on her shoulder was already showing signs of rapid tissue regeneration, another Zephyrian enhancement. But it wasn't her physical wounds that caught his attention. It was the way she sat with her head bowed, her forehands clenched into fists, her entire frame shaking with what looked like barely controlled emotion. "Hey," he said softly, approaching carefully. "You okay?" She looked up at him, and Jake was startled to see moisture in her large eyes. Tears, he realized. She was crying. She began, her voice carrying harmonics that his universal translator struggled to interpret. I do not understand what you have done. I helped you out of a tight spot. No big deal. No big deal? She stood abruptly, towering over him, and for a moment, Jake wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. But instead of aggression, her posture radiated confusion and something that looked almost like desperation. You risked your life for me. A Zephyrian, an enemy of your people. Jake frowned. Enemy? I thought the Zephyrian Defense Corps were allies of the Terran Federation. We are. Now, but you are old enough to remember the border wars. 30 years ago, warriors like me killed thousands of your kind. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I have killed humans, Captain Morrison. The admission hung in the air between them like a physical weight. Jake studied her face, seeing the pain etched in her alien features. What's your name? He asked quietly. I am Kether Anil, Storm Warrior of the 7th Talon. Blade sworn to. I mean your name, not your titles. She blinked, clearly taken aback. Keth. My birth name was Keth. Well, Keth, I don't know what you did 30 years ago, but 3 hours ago, you were fighting to protect innocent miners from raiders. That's what I saw. That's who I chose to help. She stared at him for a long moment, and then, to his utter amazement, she dropped to one knee before him. Her head bowed, she pressed all 4 of her hands to the deck in what was clearly a formal gesture. Captain Morrison, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I beg you, teach me. Teach you what? To be worthy of the mercy you showed me. She looked up at him, those cat-like eyes bright with unshed tears. My people created me to be a weapon. We do not understand concepts like compassion for enemies or sacrifice for strangers. But you showed me something I have never experienced. Jake felt his throat tighten. Keth, I have served my corps faithfully for 43 years, she continued, her voice gaining strength. But in all that time, I have never understood what I felt when you chose to save me instead of preserving your own safety. Please, I beg you to teach me how to be more than just a weapon. Teach me how to be human. The word hung between them, carrying weight that went far beyond species. Jake realized she wasn't talking about biology or genetics. She was talking about the capacity for selfless action, for choosing compassion over safety, for seeing worth in beings different from yourself. He reached down and gently took one of her hands, helping her to her feet. Her skin was warm and slightly rough, with a texture like fine sandpaper. First lesson, he said with a small smile. Friends don't kneel to each other. She stood, towering over him again, but somehow seeming smaller and more vulnerable than when she'd been surrounded by enemies. Friends? She repeated the word carefully, as if testing its weight. Yeah. I think that's what we are now. For the first time since he'd seen her, Kether Anil Keth smiled. It transformed her entire face, turning the fierce warrior into something warmer, more approachable. Then I have much to learn about friendship as well, she said. As Jake set course for the nearest Federation outpost, he reflected on how a simple cargo run had become something far more significant. He had set out to deliver supplies, and had instead delivered something much more precious: hope. Hope that understanding could bridge even the vastest differences between species. Behind him, Keth sat quietly studying a holographic star chart, but Jake knew she was really studying something far more complex, the map to becoming more than the sum of her programming, the path to choosing who she wanted to be, rather than accepting what she had been made to be. Sometimes, the greatest rescues weren't about saving lives, but about saving souls.